My name is Tessa, and for the last 10 years, my life has been a secret, wrapped in a lie, a story bound in someone else's name. The world knew my mother, Eleanor Vane, as a literary icon, a weaver of words who could capture the delicate, complex heart of human relationships. But I was the one who spun the thread. I was the ghost in her machine, the silent author of every bestseller that funded her champagne-soaked, high society existence. And tonight, at the 87th Annual Aurelian Prize ceremony, I knew that a ghost was finally about to come back to life, and that the sweetest revenge wouldn't be a chapter in a book, but a truth that would burn an entire library to the ground. Before I dive into how one pre-recorded video managed to upend the literary world and expose a decade of deception, I'd love to know where you're watching from. So please drop your city or country in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you've ever felt underestimated or had someone else take credit for your hard work, maybe hit that like button, because I think you'll understand the journey I'm about to share. And for all the new viewers here, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on more stories about finding your voice and taking back your power. It all started on my 18th birthday. I wasn't at a party with friends, surrounded by balloons and cake. I was in my mother's cavernous, sterilely white study, a room that always smelled faintly of expensive perfume and dying flowers. I had just handed her a manuscript, my first. It was a trembling, raw thing I'd poured my entire soul into, a story titled Echoes in the Attic. It was about a young woman who felt invisible in her own home, whose voice was only heard in the creaks of the floorboards above the lively parties she was never invited to. I thought she would be proud. I thought, perhaps for the first time, she would see me. She read the final page, her perfectly manicured fingers resting on the paper, and a slow, calculating smile spread across her face. It wasn't a mother's smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just cornered its prey. "Tessa, darling," she had said, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. "This is extraordinary. Truly, you have a gift." My heart had soared for a single, foolish second before she continued. "But you, my sweet girl, you're like a rare, delicate orchid. You're meant for the greenhouse, not the chaos of the garden, the world of publishing. It's a cruel, vicious place. They would tear you apart." She stood up and walked over to me, placing her cool hands on my shoulders. "You're too shy, too awkward. You get flustered just ordering a coffee. Can you imagine a press tour? The interviews? The critics?" Every word was a carefully aimed dart, striking a bullseye on my deepest insecurities. Insecurities she had so diligently cultivated over the years. "I can protect you," she offered, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let me be the face of this. Let me be the shield. I'll handle the ugly parts, and you can just stay here, safe, and do what you do best. Right." She promised me an allowance, enough to live on, enough to not have to worry about the real world. She framed it as an act of supreme maternal love, a sacrifice she was making for my well-being. I was 18, desperately craving her approval, and terrified of the world she painted in such menacing colors. So I agreed. I became her ghost, and she became a star. The next decade was a blur of keystrokes and quiet resentment. I lived in a small, third-floor walk-up apartment across town, a place my mother referred to as my little writing nook, as if it were a charming affectation, and not the absolute limit of what my allowance could afford. She would visit once a month, gliding in on a cloud of Chanel No. 5, to collect my latest pages and dispense her brand of maternal guidance, The prose in Chapter 5 feels a bit morose, Tessa. Remember, readers want inspiration, not your melancholy. Or, I told the New York Times the idea for The Glass Weaver came to me while I was summering in Tuscany. It's a much better story than you being sad about a broken vase, don't you think? I never went to Tuscany. I'd never been outside the country. The broken vase had been a gift from my grandmother, the only person who had ever truly encouraged my writing, and my mother had knocked it over during one of her theatrical tirades about the caterers for her last book launch. I wrote 5 novels under her name: Echoes in the Attic, The Portrait's Secret, Wintering Harbor, The Glass Weaver, and finally, The Gilded Cage. Each one became a bestseller. Each one added another layer of gold to her celebrity, another diamond bracelet to her wrist, another reason for her to be toasted at lavish parties I was never invited to. The one time I did attend a launch party for Wintering Harbor, I'd had to beg her. She finally relented, on the condition that I try not to look so terrified. I spent the entire evening in a dark corner, nursing a single glass of cheap champagne, my dress feeling like a costume. At one point, I stood near a circle of her adoring fans as she held court. A young, eager journalist asked her, "Eleonora, the theme of finding one's voice after being silenced is so powerful in this book. What personal experience did you draw from?" My mother laughed, a tinkling, practiced sound. "Oh, you know," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "One simply has to imagine what it must feel like for the less fortunate, for those without the confidence to speak their truth. It's an exercise in empathy, really." She looked right past me, her eyes sweeping the room for someone more important to talk to. I felt myself shrink, becoming smaller and smaller, until I was nothing more than a shadow on the wall. I left without saying goodbye. On the subway ride home, the bitter irony tasted like ash in my mouth. She was being praised for her empathy in a story about my own suffocating silence, a silence she herself had orchestrated and ruthlessly enforced. My grandmother, Clara, had been my only true ally. She was the one who had given me my first leather-bound journal, its blank pages a promise of infinite worlds. She smelled of cinnamon and old paper, and her hands, gnarled with arthritis, were the gentlest I had ever known. She lived in a small cottage upstate, and I spent my summers there, writing stories in the attic while the scent of her baking bread drifted up through the floorboards. She would read everything I wrote, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You have a fire in you, Tessa," she'd told me once, tapping a finger against a short story I'd written. "Don't ever let anyone mistake it for smoke." When my mother first proposed her arrangement, I had tried to call Clara to ask for her advice, but my mother had been one step ahead. "I spoke to your grandmother," she had informed me coolly. "I explained the situation. She agrees it's for the best. She's getting older, Tessa. We mustn't worry her with your anxieties." I later found out that my mother had told her a completely different story, something about a special mentorship program she had designed for me. Clara passed away 2 years into the lie before she could ever see the full scope of the gilded cage my mother had built around me. At her funeral, my mother had wept crocodile tears, clutching my arm and whispering, she was so proud of my success. She always knew I had it in me. The rage that I felt in that moment was cold and sharp, a shard of ice in my chest. It was then that the first seeds of rebellion were planted. For years, they lay dormant, buried under a thick layer of fear and self-doubt. But they were there, waiting. The idea for The Gilded Cage came to me in the dead of winter, during a particularly bleak period. My heat was broken, I was living on ramen noodles because my allowance was late, and my mother was on the cover of Vanity Fair, photographed in her sprawling library, talking about her creative process. I saw the picture on a newsstand, her smiling face next to the headline, Eleonora Vane, the voice of a generation I was a part of, but utterly invisible to. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my cheap particle board desk, and I started to write. I didn't plan it. I didn't outline it. I just let the truth pour out of me, thinly veiled as fiction. It was the story of Cordelia, a brilliant artist, who is kept locked away in a beautiful mansion by her mother, Ilara, a celebrated patron of the arts who passes off Cordelia's masterpieces as her own discoveries. Ilara convinces Cordelia that the world is too ugly for her sensitive soul, all while basking in the glory of her daughter's talent. It was the truest thing I had ever written. It was my entire life, my pain, my rage, my suffocating love, and my desperate desire for freedom, all bound up in 400 pages of prose. When I finished it, I felt hollowed out, but also strangely powerful. I knew it was the best thing I had ever written. I also knew it was the most dangerous. I sent the manuscript to my mother, as always. A week later, she called me, her voice trembling with excitement. Tessa, my God, The Gilded Cage. It's a masterpiece. It's sublime. I held my breath, waiting for the flicker of recognition, the moment she would see herself in the monstrous, manipulative Ilara. It never came. This exploration of a complex mother-daughter bond, she continued, her voice thick with emotion. The fierce, protective love of a mother trying to shield her gifted child from a cruel world. It's so raw, so honest. It's our story, darling. My blood ran cold. She hadn't seen a villain. She'd seen a hero. She'd read a testament to her own abuse and interpreted it as a love letter. In her bottomless narcissism, she had completely missed the point. She thought the book was a tribute to her. That was the moment the dormant seeds of rebellion finally broke through the soil. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. She would never see me. She was incapable of it. I was not a person to her. I was a resource, a tool, and a tool could not be betrayed, only used. That night, I didn't write. I researched. For hours, I scrolled through articles, looking for someone who specialized in taking down untouchable public figures. And then I found him, Marcus Thorne, an investigative journalist with a reputation for being a bulldog, known for his exposés on fraud and corruption in the highest echelons of society. His tagline on his professional website read, "The truth has no price tag." I stared at his contact form for a full hour, my cursor hovering over the send button. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I wrote a short, anonymous message. I have a story about a celebrated author, a story that's been hidden for 10 years. It's a story about a ghost who is ready to speak. I hit send before I could lose my nerve, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. A week went by, and then 2. I heard nothing. I started to despair, thinking my anonymous, cryptic message had been dismissed as the ramblings of a crank. My mother, meanwhile, was in overdrive. Her publisher had fast-tracked The Gilded Cage, convinced it was a cultural touchstone in the making. The advance praise was deafening. I was trapped in a surreal nightmare, forced to listen to my mother on morning talk shows, discussing the profound maternal instincts that had inspired my work. As a mother, she'd say, dabbing a tear from her eye, you want to build a fortress of love around your child. This book is that fortress. I wanted to scream. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, an email appeared in my inbox. The subject line was simply, "The Ghost." My heart stopped. It was from Marcus Thorne. "I'm intrigued," he wrote. "Meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m., the Black Cat Cafe on Avenue A. Come alone. Ask for Mr. Black." The place was a dive bar, dark and anonymous. The kind of place no one from my mother's world would ever set foot in. It was perfect. I spent the next 24 hours in a state of sheer terror, rehearsing what I would say, my stomach in knots. Was I really going to do this? Expose my own mother? Ruin her life? The lifetime of conditioning fought against the burgeoning rage. You're too awkward. You're too fragile. You'll make a fool of yourself. But then, I would picture her face on the cover of that magazine, and the resolve would harden in my gut. I had to do it. Not just for me, but for the 18-year-old girl who had been so easily manipulated, so cruelly silenced. The news broke on a rainy Monday in October. I was staring out my apartment window, watching the drops race down the glass, when my phone buzzed with a news alert. The Gilded Cage, nominated for the Aurelian Prize. The Aurelian. It was the most prestigious literary award in the country, the Pulitzer of our time. Winning it was like being anointed a god of the literary world. My first feeling was a bizarre, disconnected jolt of pride. My book, my work was worthy of an Aurelian. The feeling was immediately swallowed by a wave of icy dread. This would elevate my mother from a celebrity to a legend. The lie would be set in stone, immortalized. My phone rang almost instantly. It was her. "We did it," she screamed, her voice shrill, with a joy that had nothing to do with we. "Can you believe it, Tessa? The Aurelian. Oh my God. I have to call my publicist. What does one wear to accept an Aurelian? Something iconic." She talked for 15 uninterrupted minutes about gowns and speeches and after parties. She never once said, "Thank you." She never once acknowledged that I was the one who had written the nominated book. The call ended with a brisk instruction. "Now, Tessa, I know this is exciting, but it's crucial you stay in the background. The press will be swarming. The last thing we need is you looking like a deer in the headlights and creating an awkward scene. Just enjoy the moment from afar. For me." I hung up the phone, my hand steady. The last vestiges of my fear and doubt were gone, burned away by the white-hot certainty of her words. She hadn't just forgotten me. She was actively erasing me. "Enjoy the moment from afar," I whispered to the empty room. "Oh, I will." I immediately emailed Marcus. "It's time," I wrote. "The Aurelian Prize. That's the stage." Marcus Thorne was not what I expected. I had pictured an older, grizzled man, smelling of stale coffee and cynicism. The man who stood up when I walked into the Black Cat Cafe was in his late 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He wore a simple, well-worn tweed jacket and had an air of quiet intensity. He didn't shake my hand. He just gestured to the booth. "Mr. Black?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Just Marcus," he said, his voice calm and even. "Tell me everything, and don't leave out a single detail." For the next 2 hours, I talked. I told him about the first manuscript, the allowance, the years of emotional manipulation, the stolen inspirations, the casual cruelty disguised as maternal concern. I brought a small box with me, filled with evidence, handwritten drafts of every novel, time-stamped computer files, my bank statements showing the pathetic monthly allowance payments from her personal account, labeled household help. I even had a few secret audio recordings on my phone of our conversations. where she would explicitly tell me to stay hidden or would take credit for a plot point I'd just created. Marcus listened patiently, his expression unreadable. He examined the evidence, his eyes scanning the documents with unnerving focus. When I finally finished, my throat raw, I leaned back, exhausted and exposed. "Do you believe me?" I asked, the question hanging in the stale air between us. He looked up from a letter my mother had written me, a letter where she'd called my writing a charming hobby that we've cleverly monetized. He looked me straight in the eye. "I believe you," he said, and the relief was so profound it almost made me weep. "But belief isn't enough. We need a plan. You said you want to reclaim your name, not just destroy hers. That's harder. Destruction is easy. Creation is hard." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "The Aurelian Prize is in 3 weeks. That's a very public stage. If we do this, there's no going back. Her career will be over, but your life will be put under a microscope. Every troll, every critic, every gossip columnist will have a piece of you. You've lived in the shadows for a decade. Are you ready to step into the brightest, harshest spotlight imaginable?" I thought of my grandmother. I thought of her words. "You have a fire in you, Tessa. Don't ever let anyone mistake it for smoke." "Yes," I said, my voice clear and strong for the first time. "I'm ready. I'm tired of being smoke. I want to be the fire." The next 2 weeks were a blur of clandestine activity. Marcus was a master strategist. He knew that a simple article, no matter how well researched, could be dismissed as tabloid trash, a case of a bitter, fame-hungry daughter. We needed something irrefutable, something explosive. "We need you," he said. "Your voice, your face, telling your story." The plan was audacious. Marcus had an old contact, a video technician named Leo, who worked for the broadcast network that aired the Aurelian Awards. Leo was a quiet, unassuming man who, according to Marcus, had a deep-seated hatred for the pomposity of the celebrity class after 20 years of working thankless jobs behind the scenes. For a significant sum, which Marcus fronted from his publication's Special Projects Fund, Leo agreed to help. He would ensure that a single video file could be queued up and played on the main screens at a precise moment, overriding the live feed. He would disguise it as a breaking news graphic test that had been accidentally triggered. It was a huge risk for him, but the allure of being the man behind the biggest scandal in literary history was too tempting to resist. We met in a small, soundproofed studio Marcus had rented under a false name. The setup was simple: a single chair against a plain black backdrop. I was wearing a simple gray sweater, no makeup, my hair pulled back. I looked like myself, not an actress playing a part. Marcus set up the camera. "Just talk to me, Tessa," he said from behind the lens. "Imagine you're telling the story to one person who needs to hear it." My hands were sweating. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. The first take was a disaster. I stammered. I lost my train of thought. My voice cracked. My mother's voice was in my head. "You're so awkward. You can't do this." Marcus stopped the recording. He walked over and knelt in front of me. "Tessa, forget her. Forget the world. Think about that 18-year-old girl in that study. What does she need you to say?" I closed my eyes and pictured her. I saw her hopeful, terrified face. I saw her handing over her soul in a stack of paper, and the anger returned, clean and pure. "Okay," I said, opening my eyes. "Let's do it again." The second take was different. I started by reading the first page of The Gilded Cage, my voice clear and steady, letting my own words, the ones praised by critics around the world, fill the silent room. Then, I looked directly into the camera lens. "My name is Tessa Vane," I said, "and I am the author of that passage, and of every word in the novel, The Gilded Cage. For the last 10 years, I have been the ghostwriter for the woman you all know as Eleonora Vane, my mother. I laid it all out, the arrangement, the allowance, the emotional manipulation. I held up the bank statements to the camera. I played a short, damning audio clip where my mother could be heard saying, 'Your name on the cover wouldn't sell a single copy, darling. Be realistic.' I spoke for 10 minutes, my voice never wavering. I ended with the most important part. Tonight, this story, my story, ends. The story of the ghost is over, but my story, the author's story, is just beginning." I held up a single, bound manuscript with a simple, stark cover. "This is Unwritten, my debut novel under my own name. It will be in bookstores next month." I finished, and the silence in the studio was absolute. Marcus just stared at me from behind the camera for a long moment. Then he slowly smiled. "That," he said, "was fire. The day before the awards, we had our biggest scare. I was at my apartment, boxing up some personal things, when my mother showed up, unannounced. I had a box of my old journals and drafts sitting by the door, the box labeled TV Evidence, that I was supposed to drop with Marcus. My heart leaped into my throat. She swept in, not even noticing it. "Just came to drop off your allowance, dear," she said, placing an envelope on my cluttered kitchen counter as if she were bestowing a great charity. Her eyes scanned my small, shabby living room with disdain. "And to remind you, Tessa, tomorrow night you are to be nowhere near the venue. Not in the lobby, not across the street. I want your phone off. I don't want any distractions." Her gaze fell on the box. "What's this?" she asked, nudging it with the pointed toe of her $1,000 shoe. "Oh, just some old college papers," I said, my voice miraculously steady. "Getting rid of them." She sniffed. "Good. Clutter is the enemy of a clear mind." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "I am proud of you, in my own way," she said, a line she must have rehearsed. "You've been a very good, quiet daughter. You've enabled me to do great things." She left, and I leaned against the door, my legs shaking. Enabled me to do great things. The condescension was breathtaking. Any lingering doubt I had about my plan vanished in that moment. She wasn't just my antagonist. She was the villain in a story that desperately needed a new ending. The night of the Aurelian Prize ceremony, I was not in a gown. I was in Marcus Thorne's cramped, chaotic office, surrounded by monitors and the low hum of computers. The room smelled of stale pizza and nervous energy. Marcus had a live feed of the broadcast on the main screen. Leo, our inside man, had confirmed via a coded text message 20 minutes earlier. "The cat is in the bag." All we had to do was wait. I watched the screen as if it were a portal to another universe. I saw the glittering attendees, the flashing cameras on the red carpet, the forced smiles of Hollywood actors. And then I saw her, my mother, Eleonora Vane, emerged from a black limousine. She was wearing a custom-made gown of shimmering gold silk. She looked regal, triumphant, every inch the literary queen she pretended to be. She floated down the red carpet, posing for the cameras, her smile wide and confident. A reporter shoved a microphone in her face. "Eleonora, how does it feel to be here tonight? The front-runner for your incredible book about the mother-daughter bond." My mother placed a hand over her heart. "It's overwhelming," she said, her voice catching perfectly. I just feel so full of love. This book was a gift from my muse, a tribute to the most sacred relationship a woman can have. I felt a bitter laugh escape my lips. My muse. I was her muse, her ghost, her secret, her shame. On the screen, she blew a kiss to the camera and swept inside. Marcus glanced at me. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded, my eyes glued to the monitor. "I've never been better." We sat in tense silence for what felt like an eternity. We watched other awards being handed out for poetry and biography. My stomach was a tight knot of anticipation and fear. Finally, the category for Best Novel arrived. The presenter, a famously handsome actor, read the list of nominees. When he got to Out the Gilded Cage, the camera cut to my mother in the front row. She had a look of serene, humble expectation on her face. A look I knew she had practiced in the mirror for weeks. And the Aurelian Prize for Best Novel goes to... The presenter opened the envelope. A dramatic pause. Eleonora Vane for The Gilded Cage. The auditorium erupted in applause. My mother's face broke into a flawless performance of shocked delight. She pressed her fingertips to her lips, her eyes wide. She hugged the person next to her, and then, like a queen ascending her throne, she glided towards the stage. She accepted the heavy golden statuette, cradling it like a baby. She stepped up to the microphone, the applause washing over her. "Oh my," she began, her voice a perfect blend of humility and power. I am speechless to be recognized for a story that is so deeply personal. A story about the fierce, unbreakable, sometimes painful, but always sacred bond between a mother and her daughter. It is the greatest honor of my life. The camera panned to the audience. Famous actresses were dabbing their eyes. Critics were nodding in solemn approval. She was magnificent. She was a fraud. "This book," she continued, her voice swelling with emotion, "is a testament to all the mothers who would do anything to protect their children, who build a gilded cage of love and safety around them, knowing that one day they must let them fly free." In Marcus's office, I muttered, "Now, Leo," as if on cue, just as my mother was lifting the award high in the air for a dramatic pause. The host of the ceremony, a well-known comedian, walked briskly onto the stage, a look of confusion on his face. "Excuse me, Eleonora," he said, touching her arm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to be having a technical issue. We apologize. Wait, what is this?" He looked up at the massive screens that flanked the stage. They had gone black. Then, a stark white graphic appeared. "Breaking news." The auditorium fell into a confused murmur. My mother lowered the award, her perfect smile faltering for the first time. She looked from the host to the screens, a flicker of irritation crossing her face at having her moment interrupted. Then, the screens flickered again, and my face appeared. Not glamorous, not on a red carpet, but my plain, unadorned face, 20 feet high, looking out at the stunned audience. In Marcus's office, I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the desk. My own recorded voice, calm and clear, filled the silent, cavernous hall. "My name is Tessa Vane." I watched my mother's face on the monitor. Her expression shifted from irritation to utter confusion. The camera in the auditorium was doing a tight close-up on her. It was merciless. My recorded self began to read the first page of The Gilded Cage. A wave of whispers swept through the crowd. They recognized the words. On screen, my mother's confusion began to curdle into something else, a dawning, sickening dread. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the statuette. When my video self finished reading, I looked directly into the camera. "I am the author of that passage," my voice declared. echoing through the theater. And, of every word in the novel, the gilded cage. For the last 10 years, I have been the ghostwriter for the woman you all know as Eleonora Vane. My mother. A collective gasp went through the audience. It was a physical sound, a wave of shock. The camera refused to leave my mother's face. The mask of the beloved literary icon was cracking, crumbling in real time. Her mouth opened slightly, a silent no forming on her lips. Her perfect composure shattered, replaced by a raw, naked panic. My recorded voice continued, laying out the decade of lies, the evidence flashing briefly on screen. The audio clip of her voice filled the room. Your name on the cover wouldn't sell a single copy, darling. Be realistic. Someone in the audience swore loudly. My mother flinched as if she'd been struck. Her eyes, wide with horror, darted around the room, but there was nowhere to hide. Every eye in the room, every camera, was on her. She was trapped in the glare of a truth she could no longer control. The video ended with me holding up my own manuscript, unwritten, announcing my real debut. Then the screens went black. For a full 5 seconds, there was absolute ringing silence in the auditorium. Then, chaos erupted. My mother stood frozen on the stage, the golden statuette slipping from her numb fingers and clattering to the floor with a loud, unforgiving clang. In the office, Marcus let out a long, slow whistle. Well, he said, turning to me with a grin, the ghost is out of the bottle. My phone, which had been silent on the desk, began to vibrate. Then it lit up with calls and notifications, a cascade of them, one after another, an endless stream. It was like a dam had broken. Marcus's own phone started ringing. He picked it up. Thorne. Yes, she's with me. No comment at this time. A statement will be released through her publisher tomorrow. He hung up and looked at me. That was the New York Times. The screen showed the pandemonium in the theater. My mother was being ushered off the stage by 2 producers, her face ashen, her golden gown now looking like a cheap costume. She looked lost, diminished, a queen suddenly stripped of her crown and her kingdom in front of the entire world. I felt a dizzying cocktail of emotions, terror, vindication, a wild, soaring exhilaration, and a strange, hollow pang of something that might have been pity, but wasn't. I had done it. I had burned the gilded cage to the ground. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Ja, Tessa tells all and Ta Ghostwriter Gate were trending worldwide. My anonymous face was suddenly on every news site. The publisher of Unwritten, a small but respected press Marcus had connected me with, had moved the release date up. Pre-orders were crashing their website. My inbox was a flood of emails from agents, film producers, and journalists from around the globe. I ignored all of them, letting Marcus and my new publisher handle the storm. I turned off my phone, unplugged my laptop, and for the first time in 10 years, I just sat in my own quiet apartment and breathed. The silence wasn't empty or lonely anymore. It was peaceful. It was mine. 3 days after the awards, a call came through to the new, unlisted number Marcus had arranged for me. It was a blocked ID. I knew who it was. I hesitated, then answered, putting the phone on speaker. Hello? Tessa? It was her voice, but it was a voice I had never heard before. It was small, thin, stripped of all its commanding authority. It was the voice of a ghost. Tessa, darling. The old term of endearment sounded absurd now. What have you done? There was no anger, no shouting, just a bewildered, pathetic whine. You've ruined me. You've ruined us. Everything I built. For you. For our family. It's all gone. I remained silent, listening to the desperate spin. the last-ditch effort at manipulation. "We can fix this, you know," she went on, her voice gaining a frantic edge. "You can release a statement. Tell them you were confused, that you were having some sort of episode, a cry for help. I can forgive you, Tessa. I'm your mother. I can forgive you, and we can put this all behind us." That was it. Even now, after total, public humiliation, her first instinct was not remorse, not an apology, but a command, an expectation that I would once again erase myself to save her. And in that moment, I felt the last chain break. "No, Mother," I said, and my own voice was calm, steady, and unrecognizable to me. "There is no us to fix. There is no we to put this behind. There is only you, and there is me. You built a career on my silence. Now you can live with the noise. Tessa, please." "Goodbye, Mother," I said, and I ended the call. I didn't slam the phone down. I didn't cry. I just pressed the button. I had hung up on my mother for the first time in my life. It was the quietest, most powerful thing I had ever done. I felt free. 6 months later, I was sitting on a plush sofa in a television studio in New York City, across from one of the most respected interviewers in the country. My novel, Unwritten, had debuted at #1 on the bestseller list and had stayed there for 12 consecutive weeks. The film rights had sold for a figure that still made my head spin. I was no longer the shy, awkward girl who was afraid to order coffee. I had been through the fire of the media storm and had come out the other side, not unscathed, but whole. "Tessa," the interviewer said, her expression gentle but direct, "everyone wants to know. Your mother, she's disappeared from public life completely. Have you spoken to her? Is there any chance for reconciliation?" I had prepared for this question. I took a breath and looked into the camera, knowing millions of people were watching. "What my mother and I had was not a relationship," I said carefully. "It was a contract, a very damaging one. And that contract is now void. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about absolving someone else. It's about freeing yourself. I forgive her for not being the mother I needed, and I've freed myself from the hope that she ever will be. I wish her peace, but my focus now is on my own future, a future I'm writing for myself." It was the truth. It was a boundary, and it was final. The interview was a success. The world, it turned out, wasn't as cruel and vicious as my mother had led me to believe. The world was full of people who understood, people who had been silenced, who had been underestimated, who cheered for the ghost who had finally found her voice. Today, I live in a small house upstate, not far from where my grandmother's cottage used to be. It has a real writing studio, a room with a big window that looks out onto a forest of birch trees. The walls are lined with bookshelves, and on one prominent shelf, a single copy of The Gilded Cage sits next to 5 copies of Unwritten. I keep it there as a reminder of where I came from, and a reminder of the power of telling the truth. My mother, from what I hear, she lives a quiet life now, funded by a trust my grandfather left her. She never wrote another word. The literary world forgot Eleonora Vane as quickly as it had lionized her. Sometimes I wonder if she ever truly understood what she did, if she ever read The Gilded Cage again and saw herself in its pages. But then I realize it doesn't matter. Her validation was the cage, and I no longer need it. I found my own validation, not in the applause of an audience or the number of books sold, but in the simple, profound act of typing my own name on the title page of my own story. My journey taught me that your value isn't determined by who sees it or acknowledges it. It exists independently, a quiet, steady flame. And sometimes The people who try the hardest to smother that flame are the very ones who force you to learn how to become a fire. So that's my story. It's been a long and painful road, but one that led me to a life I never thought possible, a life of my own making. And I want to thank you for listening, for being a part of this final, triumphant chapter. It means the world to me. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to fight to get credit for your own work or ideas? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? Share your stories in the comments below, because our voices are stronger when we share them together. And if my story resonated with you, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more true stories about overcoming the odds. Share this video with anyone you think might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your own narrative. Thank you again for joining me. Remember, family isn't always about blood. It's about who stands with you in the light and helps you find your way out of the dark. I wish you all the strength in the world to find and use your own voice.